It's May 16th, 2026. Welcome to YesToHellWith.com. Today we confront one of the most tragic realities inside the modern judicial system, the difference between the record and the truth. Most Americans assume these two things are the same. They believe if something appears in court records, if a conviction exists, if appeals were denied, if prosecutors defended the case, then the underlying facts must already have been independently verified. But that assumption may itself be the problem, because once assumption becomes institutionalized into the record, future courts, prosecutors, and agencies often begin defending the record itself rather than independently re-examining the original foundation. That is the structural concern at the center of this entire series about Orlando Carter. Think about the progression. A bank makes false assertions. Investigators accept those false assertions. Prosecutors formalize the false assertions. The courtroom institutionalizes them. The jury accepts the false assertions. And the conviction enters the record. And from that point forward, future officials begin treating the existence of the conviction itself as evidence that the underlying structure must have been valid. That is disastrous. The record begins replacing independent verification. Now consider the contradictions that later emerged in the Carter case. The OCC confirmed there was no $4 million loan. PNC admitted as such and later asserted a $4 million loan never existed. The Executive Office of United States Attorneys found no records concerning the destruction of the loan records, which contradicts Glassman's lie. Yet the conviction structure continued to be defended anyway. This is where the system becomes self-protective, because once a conviction exists, admitting foundational error threatens investigators, prosecutors, agencies, courts, and institutional legitimacy itself. This is not merely a legal issue, it is a psychological issue. Institutions protect continuity. Institutions resist admitting foundational failure. And institutional preservation became more important than independently reevaluating the truth. This is why the Liberty Dialogues framework matters. The Liberty Dialogue series asks, was the structure independently proven? Not merely was the record preserved. Those are not the same thing. And that distinction disappeared. The system stopped asking, did the obligation actually exist? And instead began asking, how do we preserve the conviction? That is the structural warning at the center of this series. Because once a system begins protecting conclusions instead of revisiting presumptions, every future decision becomes contaminated by the prior one. Future prosecutors inherit the presumptions. Future courts rely upon the record because institutional acceptance itself becomes treated as proof. That is the deeper danger. At that point, the record no longer reflects independent verification. The record reflects institutional continuity. The original prosecution hardened into institutional reality, and later contradictions became threats, not merely to one conviction, but to the integrity of every institution that had already adopted the original narrative. It's just amazing. Now understand something else. Most Americans assume appeals primarily exist to correct factual error, but appellate systems often review procedure, standards, preservation, and the existing record itself. And once the record is built upon presumptions accepted years earlier, future courts begin operating from the premise that those presumptions were independently validated. That is why the courtroom stage matters so much. And that is why record control matters as well. Because once presumptions harden into official judicial history, future institutions often stop verifying the original foundation. Now, this becomes even more important when we examine the role of institutional prestige, because prestige itself can become one of the mechanisms through which presumptions harden into accepted reality. And that is where we go next, the prestige of government. And as always, may truth reign supreme.